Alright, welcome back. So I made this graph in PIFA. This graph shows the relationship between distance on the x-axis and applied DPS on the y-axis. The distance means the distance between two ships. And I plotted the DPS relative to distance for several Tech 1 frigates. So the green line is the Merlin with void loaded, with blasters and void loaded. When you have blue line, this is the Condor with rockets and rage missiles loaded. The red line is the Executioner with beams and X-ray loaded. And finally, the orange line is the Condor with light missiles and Scorch faction missiles loaded. Now, one thing that you will immediately notice that each of these ships has a specific window in terms of distance to the opponent where it deals maximum damage relative to the opposition. For Merlin, it is below something like 3.5 kilometers. For Condor, it is between 3.5 and 10 kilometers. For Executioner, it is between 10 and 16 kilometers. And for Condor with light missiles, it is beyond 16 kilometers. And this is not a coincidence. Basically, any feat in 1v1 faction warfare falls into one of these categories. And any feat prefers to fight at a specific range where it will be the most effective relative to our feats, or let's call them archetypes. So what are these archetypes? The first archetype is the Brawler. Brawling feat likes to fight at minimum range. Usually it is less than 5 kilometers. And by the way, even if you load long-range ammo in a Brawler, so for example, if you take Merlin with blasters and load null, it will still be worse in Scrum Kiting range than Scrum Kiting Condor. The difference just won't be that massive, but it still will be less efficient. So the choice of armor actually doesn't really change this situation. Now for Brawlers, you typically go with an Afterburner Scrum Web or Afterburner Double Web for control. So you try to have the maximum control possible to either engage in position or have control to change the initial engagement range. These ships usually have a maximum damage and the maximum tank compared to our styles. And next is Scrum Kiter. So the Scrum Kiter is the ship that likes to fight at the edge of Scrum range, which is about 10 kilometers. And for control, you usually use Afterburner Scrum Web again, sometimes with double webs. So the control between Brawlers and Scrum Kiters are quite similar, and a lot of it comes down to the positional advantage that we talked about in the previous video. For example, when Brawler has positional advantage, Brawlers usually will be favored against Scrum Kiters. But if Scrum Kiters have positional advantage, then they will be favorites against Brawlers, because their control is similar, so it comes down to who starts at the preferred initial engagement range. Next styles is Web Kiting. Web Kiting ships like to fight at the edge of web range. So it is 13 kilometers, and this drop-off is when executioner loses the web at 13 kilometers. Their control is Afterburner, Rope Disruptor, Web, and usually they fight between 10 and 16, 17 kilometers, usually anywhere further, and where damage is very low. Next you have kiters. So kiters are ships with micro warp drives and warp disruptors. They have minimum tank, if any tank, and the tank is the distance. So we try to mitigate the damage. You can see it pretty clearly here. For example, if a Condor stays at something like 20 to 24 kilometers, it doesn't matter that it has no tank, because it will simply take no damage, because none of our ships can actually apply DPS at this range. So your control and your tank is speed and mobility. And there is a fifth archetype to complete this rock, paper, scissors cycle, because if we have no anti-kiters, then kiters would be the main style for solo PvP. You simply take a kiter, and when you sit inside the complex, and the only way to kill you is to take another kiter. But there are anti-kiting styles as well. These are essentially brawlers, but the brawlers that prioritize speed over tank. So they use micro warp drive, scrum web, or dual prop plus scrum, and they try to be as fast as possible while still keeping pretty high DPS and high and reasonable tank. Let's put it this way. So the idea is you engage a kiter out of position, but because you are faster, or at least you are fast enough to land a scrum or a web, you can quickly close the distance and then fight at close range that suits your ship. And since kiters have essentially no tank, this works. So these are the 5 archetypes. As I said, the vast majority of frigate and destroyer PvP falls into one of these 5 categories. In cruiser PvP and above, it kind of works, but because medium and large guns have a much higher optimal ranges, it's not as visible as in frigate and destroyer PvP. So it primarily applies to ships with small guns. Okay, in the next video I will show you how these 5 1v1 archetypes interact with each other depending on positional advantage or positional disadvantage at the start of engagement.